set, go.
Is this thing on? I can never get enough volume. It's been a good day, actually, because I got to watch WVU whip up on Cincinnati, and that I really enjoyed that. Actually, and by the way, before I say much more, I said we, it's just me sitting behind the mic tonight, but I got a guest on tonight. He's the brother of one of the Hillbilly broadcast cabinet members, I guess you could say. John Baker has been singing your praises, Jason.
Oh, brother.
Yeah, we got Jason Baker on this evening. How you doing, sir?
I'm better than I deserve.
Very good. But yeah, what I was
stole that from Dave Ramsey. Yeah.
Yes, I was trying to make that connection there real quick. But anyways, as I was saying, you got to watch WVU pull off one of their wins. Jason, do you? So you grew up CHM. We'll get into this in a little bit, but was professional sports out of the question for y'all?
For sure, attending, but for some reason, at some point, it probably 10, 11, 12, 13 started following. So the Indianapolis Colts are still my team, but yeah. But as far as attending college, even high school, yeah, that wasn't back in the 90s, that was not really an option.
That was a no-no. Yeah.
Yes.
So I growing up here in West Virginia, we don't have a pro team. So West Virginia completely lives and breathes the Mountaineers. And I remember about the most I was allowed to keep up with it growing up was just finding out the score after the fact. And so, I don't live that far from Morgantown where they play. And weekend before last, I actually went to my first WVU game and had a flat out ball. But it was cool to be able to experience that with, just something that I'd either heard on the radio because I listen to a lot of them now or watch on TV, and got to watch them whip the Mormons that weekend. BYU, they put a hurting on Brigham Young.
Yeah.
Anyways, so Jason, John had told me, he kept saying that this guy's been around. He has been around the CHM for a long time, and he's got a lot of stuff either to help put in perspective or some stories or whatever. So why don't you just maybe start at the beginning and fill us in a little bit about your time with CHM?
Well, first of all, you can blame me for John becoming one of your cabinet members, I guess. Only thing I had to do with that was I was just interested in the CHM, as we all know it at the Conservative Homeless Movement, and I just Googled it or put it on Spotify, I guess. And there was one other episode, and it was you, I guess, at Clinton Camp. So you must have typed in those key words. And so I've listened and I've listened to everything you've put out about the CHM for sure.
Well, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Yeah, you can. You don't need to apologize for that for me. But and in fact, Clinton Camp, my dad went there as a kid, many years, and then I've only been there once that I remember, but I sang there with God's Bible School Quartet in 2001. So that's
Clinton Camp's an old one. I think it's. Camp. I'm trying to remember when it started. It was like I want to say before. No, wait a minute. They're getting ready to come up on their 100th anniversary, I think. So, I guess we'd be talking about the 1920s and when they started. Yeah, I spent a lot of time up there, and it's still going. I don't know how strong it's going, but it's still there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I've was born and raised in a quote conservative holiness family. My grandpa was a Nazarene evangelist and old school, the conservative type from, I guess you would say, the early 1900s, and so that's what my mother was raised under. And in fact, all of my both sides of my family Nazarene, and so growing up, we did vacation Bible schools in the summer. Ever since I was 6 months old, I've been traveling all the way to 21, and a lot of states in Pennsylvania, and a lot of the connections that I had with people was through that. But then I went to high school at Union Bible College, off campus, and then went straight into God's Bible School for college and graduated in 2003 with a ministerial degree. And then throughout the other times I was at Kansas City Bible College, which I think you just had with Brian Wells. They're kind of they were always kind of the leftist of the CHM.
Yeah.
And we did Bible schools at Hope Sound Bible College at the church, at Hope Sound Bible Church in July. So the college wasn't in session, but we've also done a couple of the camps as well in February. So
you attended Kansas City?
I no, I didn't attend there. I'm just in the summertime. We had been out there at a church by there, so
Okay.
that's my least association. But I also forget the very beginning of my life. My parents were teachers at Penview in the academy, and
Oh
so
yeah.
from the time I entered this world, I have been around a Bible college, I guess you could say.
Yeah, you've all really
Not
been around.
not the entire life, but and then of course when going to high school and then going to college, and so through all that, obviously you just were in an environment where people didn't wear wedding bands. You If you did cut your hair, you put it up. Yeah, obviously
Hmm.
I didn't have any sisters, so I wasn't as tuned into all of that um, as much. But my mother, I didn't ever remember her being in short sleeves, and so all of that was just kind of a given. It was just that's just kind of what life was, whatever.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I gathered a judgmental spirit, or I learned it through that, and and it really it's something into this day that I struggle with. You're just looking at somebody and just label them. I think
Oh, me too.
Kanan and you guys have talked about that, and through that, it was just like this is what a Christian is. They look this way. They don't have a TV or whatever. I didn't grow up with a TV. There's other people that are around that would have had a TV or would have had VCR and all that, but for our family, it was no. Even to the point of we didn't play with dice growing up. We would get the spinner out and play spinners. There was no Uno. In fact, this is a story I've shared with other people that I don't ever remember anyone else still to this day. Maybe one other person. Um, my mom wasn't even on. I don't think her grandpa or even she played. Her dad even played miniature golf, and they would let us go play. But like she didn't even raised in that. And I guess she told me recently that
Wow.
it was because of the crowds. Yeah, I've been to a lot of putt putt and mini golf places. I never had a crowd, but whatever. So anyway, so I know we all have differences as far as spectrum of
Yeah,
all of this.
Ben Wyford was talking about too how they weren't allowed to play with dice as well. And I think
Yeah,
Missy has
yeah,
mentioned that there were several within the Bible Missionary Church too that wouldn't play Uno and all that because it was cards. That
yeah,
that
yep.
specific line of thought wasn't as much here in West Virginia, but a lot of the other stuff I definitely resonate with.
Yeah, and I mean, so all those, I guess you could say those. I don't know. Once again, it's just in the lately, it sounds like Archie Atwell and H.E. Darnell has come back to the forefront and preaching the just I would call it absurd standards that
Hmm.
even today we would look at the more modern day with James Plank and Dan Stetler and what they're saying. It's like they're not even saying to this degree, but I guess when you start adding those extra biblical things, there's really no stopping. It's
Yes,
just whatever, as Archie Atwell said, God said that I can put whatever I want in between the lines. And that's what he did. And it's so you get to that point, and then to me, then at least me, you start emphasizing that. Fortunately, I wasn't raised under preachers that I remember. Like Dan Parker, I don't know if you know that name or not. I've been told from my family that he preached on television every sermon. I'm guessing that's exaggeration, but it was certainly something that had an impact on them.
oh yeah,
I don't have a problem with emphasizing that there's bad things on television, but I'm guessing that not every Bible verse speaks about television in a
correct,
negative way. So,
correct.
so my point is, I don't have this great horror stories, but through that, I did see some things, um, that were just kind of crazy. In fact, when I was in high school, I it's still fun. I don't know if you have memories where you're like, was that really true? Did I really see that? It's like, yeah, I did. We're having a time of revival or special services. I don't know. I think God was there, but unfortunately, um, I don't think that means the devil's not either. And it just went to such an extreme that there was a girl there that felt like basketball was her god, and she literally brought a basketball up front and was trying to rip out the insides of the basketball in front of the student
Oh
body.
boy.
And it's just like, once again, that could have seriously been a serious thing. God was speaking to her, I have no doubt. But it's also like, don't think God's telling you to rip it up in front of everybody. I don't think that's because, there's nothing wrong with the ball. It's whatever your passion for it. If you're putting that
Yeah.
first, that's the thing. And for some reason, it seems like to me, that's a great illustration of, in general, and once again, it's a broad scope, but just like, okay, yeah, don't do basketball. But it's like, no, that's not what the Bible says. The Bible's talking about the heart. Basketball might not be for you, but it doesn't mean that it's not for everybody. And when you put that on a public setting, then you get conscientious people like myself and others you're like, ooh, whoa, maybe I need to go do
Absolutely.
something more. And I think Brian Wells just mentioned that too. In fact, I went to school with Brian Wells. He's a little older than me, but at God's Bible School. But I think he mentioned that with the whole Blockbuster card, and I'm going to go get my card, and
Yeah.
I'll one up you or whatever. It's just, once again, only God knows what all that
For
through.
sure.
But to me, it's just too much of an emphasis on external or on those things that you can see, when a lot of that stuff should be dealt with privately. And I think that's interesting, growing up and getting a ministerial education and getting church history and all that, that John Wesley is considered one of the fathers of the CHM, and yet from what I've gathered, he would not even recognize the CHM in many ways.
Oh gosh, no! I mean, he would not be allowed on the platform.
He wouldn't be allowed, because he was so much about small groups and doing life, very and small, and meeting regularly, and not just having these three identical services for the most part. And my point is those bands that he would have, and those class meetings, they called it, were on a small level, 10, 15, 20 people versus 100 people. And you address those issues, and so you can deal with those, quote, extra pivotal convictions, whatever you want to call them. And I think that is something I think that has hurt the CHM. But that's just one illustration.
Let me stop you there real quick, Jason, because I was able to, as you were talking about that Archie Atwell clip, I want to play that for people. I was able to pull it up real fast. Let me just play. It's like a 20-second clip where you mentioned about him saying that he was able to, God told him he could say whatever he wanted to say.
Now, some of you don't think the Lord gave me this message, but He did. He told me I could say anything I could think of in between the lines.
I mean, that is so, hearing that now, that is so insane.
Absolutely.
And I remember as a kid, Archie Atwell, of course, he died in 94, I think it was. This is Archie Sr. So I was born in 92, so I don't really remember him. But he was still held up as he almost reached the level of sainthood. And I can remember listening to his sermon tapes a lot as a kid because he could make you laugh. And of course, this stuff never jumped out to me then. And now as I listen to it, I'm like, oh my goodness gracious.
Yeah, and what that same sermon doesn't he say, I'm going to go back to the Bible. Aren't you sorry for that?
Yes.
And I think, and there's so many points I want to make sure to get across here, but I think, I guess 2 points here. Think about that is, some people I think would kind of just slug that stuff off. I got to shrug it off, even to this day, with what James Plank just said and other things. Oh, he didn't really mean that, or it just came across wrong. And it's like, that may be true, but when they say stuff like that, and when Dan Stetler comes out and says, I'll fight you, or whatever he said, I'll knock your knees out from underneath you, and he says, I like curly buns, I like them crooked or straight, whatever he said. All I'm asking, and all these people that are on social media now are saying, or just come out and admit it, right? Just come out and say, you know what? Yeah, I don't mean that, or I said it too strong, whatever.
Yes.
I don't understand what's so difficult about that. I understand that they're afraid to, I guess, that we're going to say that sin's okay and everything. It's like, no, nobody's de-Christianizing anybody. All we're just saying is that's not biblical. Say it and move on.
Yes.
But anyway, it is what it is. But when you have a quote man of God literally say, I'm gonna go back to the Bible and say I can say whatever, it's just, man, if that doesn't give us pause, think, God have mercy on me and God have mercy on this guy. That's something I think we need to.
You're exactly right.
Think about.
I mean, for all those years, I don't know how this happened, because that stuff used to be so commonplace in a lot of the CHM. I mean, we would just hear that and eat it up, accept it, and never would think twice. I don't know how it got there, but that was the case. I think, and me and you were talking before we started the podcast, that there's definitely a spectrum to the CHM. So I think definitely now you'll see a lot of CHM people, mainly like the Bible Methodist type people, that will absolutely let you know that that's a red flag. But it seemed like back in the day, the CHM got away with a lot more.
Yes, and I did want to emphasize that even then, and I think somebody brought this out on one of the social media sites, is that Atwell was on the right side. He would have thought IHC was liberal.
Oh,
and
yeah.
all that. So
yeah.
And so, for sure, there was a spectrum then, but for sure, there's a huge spectrum now.
Mm-hmm.
And even those that are within the spectrum somewhat still who are staying up and just calling for accountability, my hat's off to them. I really, and it's kind of heartening, I guess you could say, um, to see those people that are still quote conservative and yet they're still just trying to be true to the Bible. And I think that's a really good thing.
Absolutely. So you mentioned about singing in quartet and stuff like that. How long did you do that?
I did it 1 year. I put 1 year in. I got to a bunch of camps and a bunch of churches, and I did my year. I was in the choir also, I think, a year, and then I was in the choir at UBC for a year.
So what was that like? You guys were, and it's kind of funny when I think about it, but the CHM colleges don't have sports teams. They have quartets and choirs. So essentially you were on the athletic scholarship for the CHM.
Yeah.
But what was that like?
Yeah. Sumo wrestling wasn't available at GBS, so I went out for quartet. Yeah, I mean, it was, it's kind of I never really got the big idea of quartets, at least around that age, and I'm still not sure what the big deal is. But as you're saying, it's kind of the only thing. Now they do have sports, which is kind of interesting. Now the high schools at least have sports, but
wait, are you serious?
Yeah, I am serious.
Like organized, playing other teams type sports?
Yeah.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's surprising.
I know. God's Bible School does. They're high school, and they have I think basketball and volleyball. And then Union Bible College definitely has a volleyball team.
Wow, I had no idea.
I think it's kind of loosely associated. I don't think UBC is totally. I don't know if you can just type in the website and find out their schedule, but it's definitely right there intertwined with it. Yeah, that's something that's definitely changed in the last 20 years, which is something I also wanted to kind of bring out. It's incredible, and I guess I'll say it right now, is this whole thing with internet is just incredible because the television was the big huge massive no. I guess the radio was okay in the 30s, 50s. The television, absolutely not. I Love Lucy, can't be in the same bed, can't even say the word pregnant, whatever. Our culture, I mean, it was a no, period, right? I mean, I think across the board, the CHM was absolutely not. Well, then you get the advent of the VCR and in the 80s and then into the 90s, and it starts creeping in, you quote, whatever, into some places. And then obviously technology. In fact, I remember, I think in 1999, Mark Smith, I don't know if you know that name or not, he used to be on the board at God's Bible School, and he was a president of Ohio Christian University. He mentioned, I think at a kind of seminar thing at School of Prophets or something at God's Bible School, that technology was coming where this internet and TV was going to be together. And in '99, of course, that was, I guess you were only 7 years old, but that was still in the future.
Oh yeah,
that was kind of looking. What happened? Well, obviously, look at us now. As my brother said, is James Plank in his pocket he has a television.
Exactly.
Stetler was preaching from a television because he definitely had a tablet that he was preaching.
That is so true.
Yes. And it's like he literally could be watching. In fact, I know a Baptist pastor that would watch University of Kentucky games like during concerts, like he would have Southern Gospel concerts, and he would have like in the pulpit or something. This was back years ago. It is like that could happen now, and I bet you somebody's done that. Because I just know humans. And the point is, radio's cool, I guess. Television, no way. Internet, yeah, for the most part, I guess. Bible missionary, I guess a few others, no. And then smartphones just come, so it's just going to happen. And throughout these last 2 or 3 years with all these sermon clips, I still haven't heard anybody mention smartphone, even with the red box and all that, because obviously they don't, because they all have it. But even then, why wouldn't somebody have said, you know what, YouTube, there's a lot of bad stuff on YouTube.
Yes.
TikTok, they're not all Jesus on there. Why wouldn't somebody have said that? I have no problem with that. And if anybody, I don't care who that you are, I don't care what the Christian you are. If you have a problem with somebody saying, you know what, you need to kind of watch how much you watch on YouTube or what you're watching, there's nothing wrong with that, because there's Bible that talks about that.
Exactly right. What they've done with the smartphones is they've essentially taken the approach that they should have took, in my opinion, with TV. Because y'all hear some of them talking about, if you have an issue with it, then get rid of it or whatever. It's like, okay, well, I can agree with that principle. Absolutely.
Yes.
But why didn't they do that and continue to do that with TV? It's like, well, it's the same. I mean, and they seem to what the CHM has done in so many scenarios is they've looked at what bad could potentially come from something, and then then proceed to preach against that entire thing. It's like when I was a kid. It's not as much around here now. We couldn't go to like Texas Roadhouse and stuff like that because you're around alcohol.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's like, well, okay. I mean, yeah, can alcohol cause bad stuff? Absolutely, it can. But
Absolutely.
Why not? Let's preach a little self-control or stay away from that or whatever. Instead of just saying, don't even be near it. Don't it might jump off the waitress's tray and get you or something. But yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, you couldn't. I remember Applebee's Bar and Grill. Had that bar in there, so that's not something that we would frequent. Because,
one of the scare tactics too that they used to. One of the things they used to say, I can't remember what preacher it was, but he was preaching about alcohol in restaurants. You shouldn't go there, and it was also he took the doom and gloom approach. He said, "There's coming a time when you're not going to be able to go to McDonald's without alcohol being there." So we're all like, "Oh my gosh, what are we going to do?"
Yeah. Well, now Cracker Barrel and Bob Evans have it. So,
yes. Yep. So, and those were CHM strongholds back in the day.
Oh, absolutely. And once again, I think that was, and I'll raise another one of my quote pet peeves right with that is the whole idea of calling the church a sanctuary.
Yes.
It's like, no, it's not. Have you read 1 Corinthians? Your body's the temple. And I would much rather get up and preach against the building being the sanctuary because that's only somewhere I'm only at 3 hours a week.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas my body, I'm with it 168 hours a week. And that's much harder to keep clean than it is the quote sanctuary. Because that sanctuary went out to date with the temple. That's not it. It's not even the house of God. I know. I get going about that because once again, I understand it's dedicated. I understand it's not something you just trifle with, but it's like, no, this is a place where people get help. I don't think God cares if you have a coffee in your hand. Or a donut, once again, if it's interfering in your worship, okay, talk to God about that. But to call it a sanctuary, but the whole idea, so I compare that also with restaurants. It's like, okay, they serve beer. Okay, does that mean you're getting drunk? For one thing, I've hardly ever seen drunk people at a steakhouse.
No,
I don't. Maybe I've gone to the wrong steakhouses, but it's like I don't see people just falling off. Now, obviously, if you go to a tavern at 2 a.m, you're probably going to see some drunk people.
Yes, you'll see something different.
Doesn't mean I'm drunk.
Yeah. But Texas Roadhouse at 2:00 on a Thursday afternoon, there's not going to be any drunk people in there. I can guarantee you.
No, and I guess it's just the emphasis on careful living. You just stay away from it. It's like I guess it's the same way with people. If you went to the theater, you don't know if you watch the R-rated movie or if you watch the G-rated. It's like, yeah. So you're saying the same way with restaurants. You don't think I just went in and got a steak, but even if I did get a beer, I don't think I'm drunk.
Right.
Because the Bible didn't say that you're not allowed to drink it. And it's so sad to me is the CHM in their zest, in their zealousness to be so quote careful, make it have whatever you want to say. They've just gone completely the other way and totally away from the Bible. And as you said, and others, that they lost the whole self-control. And instead of just saying drunkenness is a sin, it's clear in the Bible, being drunk is a sin, period. Don't get drunk.
Absolutely.
Instead of saying that, and that's if you drink too much cough medicine, or if you go and drink and eat, you go and drink a 2-liter of Mountain Dew like I did for finals at college. Probably wasn't the healthiest thing to do. It's the same idea. It's called moderation. It's called balance. What's so hard about that? But yet we've got to put it in our manuals. Don't drink. And even to this day, they're still doing it. Don't gamble. It's like. Yeah, I don't think the Bible says that.
It doesn't. It does not say that. This is one of my favorite topics to harp on here that you've got on. This whole idea. One of the fruits of the Spirit is self-control. And I feel like that the CHM did not prepare us that grew up in it to exercise any kind of self-control instead of learning how to not become a drunkard or not become just a flat-out whoremonger or whatever. They just said completely stay away from anything that might lead you in that general direction. So then whenever you're out in the real world, I've seen some CHM people practically fall apart.
Mm-hmm.
Because, you'll hear them talking about, I had a pastor one time, and he was talking about how terrible it was, the magazines he saw on the rack at Walmart.
Yeah.
And acting like it was the end of the world. It's like, Pastor, I get it. It ain't great. But don't let it ruin your day, for gosh sakes. Just move on, you know?
Yeah. Well, and to add to that, to this 20-hour podcast we're doing tonight. To add to that, oh, this world's getting so bad. Yeah, but did you remember the first person born was a murderer? Cain was legitimately the first person born, and he was a murderer. And also, I think they used to run around naked as actors back in Corinth or
Yes.
around those temples. It's not like Paul probably didn't see some nudity. The world's been bad for a long time.
Yes.
The world's going to be bad for a long time, or whatever. And it's once again, it's not saying to accept it. It's not to undermine sin and not to say sin's okay, but it's just saying it is what it is. It says we've been in the last days since John. This world's gonna end whenever God wants it to. It never tells us to fret about it. It says to be holy, and being holy means be holy. It doesn't mean whatever your list of whatever it is. It means what the Bible says. And if you're, and I know I work, where I work at, if I live by the Bible, I'm very separate. I'm very separate than there. And anyway, so but I just think it's so sad that there's such an emphasis and has been, and thank God for the quote Bible Methodist, even though I still think their discipline is way too more controlling than I want.
Yes,
me too. Recently, it's very accessible on the internet. 2018 edition, and even that I think they got some flack for it. But it still says in there not to wear their wedding band and all that, and I still don't biblically see where they have the authority to do that. I mean, I don't see that's helpful. But kudos to them. They try to stay up to date. They're trying to do the biblical principles. Smart people on that. I know Mark Stetler just kind of came out and was kind of promoting that of how good that was, and my hats off for them. You're not going to see too many crazy things on there. I think we were talking before we started. Here's another one that I heard the person say this, but at a Bible college, okay, God's Bible school, I'll even name it. They spent 45 minutes talking, and this is a person that was in the room talking about the rule of the sling back shoe on a woman.
Are we talking about like sandals? Is that what they meant?
I guess somewhat, but I mean, he said sling back shoe.
Shoe.
I don't know. I just know we didn't have sandals growing. There was no sandals, and for the most part, no facial hair back when I was in college up to 2003. This was after I left. The general board. This isn't even the dorm parents or dean of men talking about it. This is the general board. These are people that have are not at the school all the time talking about this. Should we remove that from our manual? Okay, so I want to say is who put that in the rule book?
I know.
Okay, that's where I want to go back.
I know.
And it's like when you hear these people say, well, our forefathers, they would just be rolling over their grave right now if they saw us now and whatever. It's like, well, hello, forefathers. Why'd you put that in there then anyway?
That's another one of my issues. Yes. I know
you mentioned you had Gerald Buston.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Well, I hear different people will mention about, but the old timers, man, they just weren't like this, or, they were so close to God. It's like the old timers are the reason we're in this mess to begin with.
Yeah. And so fortunately there's certain groups and independent churches that don't think this is kind of foreign to them somewhat as far as enforcing this. But it's also like, why are we even talking about this? Why are these even being issues when people are dying, going to hell, and when there's so many principles in the Bible that we're really not good at, loving our neighbor, not gossiping, speaking, all I have to read is Ephesians 4:25-31, and I'm convicted every time I read it. It's just like, that's just one small portion of the Bible, and it's like everything you talk about, including this podcast, to help me, or to be beneficial to those who hear it. Don't speak those that are, and yet we're going to spend 45 minutes on a meeting that we probably should be talking about the goal of the school, the vision of the school, and we're talking about if we should remove a rule that should have never been in the first place. And it's not like we're saying, okay, should we all go homosexual or lesbian? Should we allow all those people? We're not talking about that. We're not talking about biblical things here. And it's just, it takes away from, I think through this whole, I would just call the Precious James Plank fiasco, just call it that, this whole thing the last few weeks.
What did you say? Did you say the Precious?
James Plank fiasco, the Precious? Yeah, I know Precious James Plank, so I'll call him that. I'm sure Andy will love that. So,
that's great. I like that.
Take it for however you want to make it. But I think some of the things I've read on the social media is the devil is being glorified. I've heard some of the CHM pastors coming out and saying you shouldn't use social media and attacking. It's like, okay, yeah, I agree with all that. How about we just don't say that stuff in the first place? Because that's why it's divisive. Bringing holiness wouldn't even be a sight if you guys would have just stayed with the Bible. We don't
Yes.
really care what you guys do, but don't get up and say it publicly. So I know I'm going off script here, but I did want to mention the whole, because then you have, like, once the facial hair. I wasn't raised with this. It was a sin, but it my dad would have had one. My wife, my mom just doesn't like it, and so it wasn't something you saw. Period. Going to schools and all that. It wasn't something that you saw. But then at God's Bible School, it started creeping in, or they're letting off-campus students have it or whatnot. I'm not sure exactly. Well, it just wasn't a thing, though. You just shaved was a thing, and all of that. It's like there's zero in the scripture about it. In fact, you could say that you're supposed to have a beard because it says in the precious, I'll say precious here too, the verse right after the one verse they have about tattoos, Leviticus 19:27 or 29, whichever one it is. It says in there, "Don't cut the corners of your beard."
Mm-hmm.
So that's obviously assumed you have a beard. So if you're not going to have a tattoo, then you need to have a beard, is what I gather from that.
Yes.
So the point is, and you had Gerald Buston on, and he was it was a great episode. I heard him speak back in the '90s, and he said in 1999, if I remember correctly, if you remember as well, that he was sitting on the platform, and I think it was the interim president. I'm pretty sure it was V.O. Hagan that said to him, "Are you okay, or are you sick, or whatever?" And then fast forward 24 years, and the Bible teacher at Hope Sound Bible Camp had a beard on.
Yes.
It's just like,
Yeah.
wow. And once again, should have never been an issue.
Should have
why
never
is this
been.
even an issue?
Should have
It's
never been.
just
They
incredible.
spent
It's
so
just
many
incredible.
years wasted just harping on this trash. And again, it's a beard, guys. There's one thing that I do think that is a principle in Scripture as far as dress, is that a man should look like a man and a woman should look like a woman. So why, to kind of say it maybe a little like Phil Roberts, he said, it's something you got that makes you a man. Why do you want to scrape that off your face? It's like antlers for a deer. There's one way. There's a very manly thing that you can just let grow. Yeah. But they decided to preach against it.
Yeah, and I don't know, and I know the history of the CHM, kind of the 40s and 50s and whatever. The Methodists and the Nazarenes and the Wesleyan Methodists and the Pilgrim Holiness were becoming liberal and letting in their wedding band. I think what Dan Stetler talked about that in one of his sermons, where the women came to the conference ready to put the ring on, had it in her purse, and ready to put it on when they delivered it through, and all of that. And what was going on in society then? Was society getting better? No, but it just had a world war. Probably wasn't everybody loving Jesus during that time, and so the 50s probably wasn't as romantic and just so the wife at home and the guy working and the kids obeying their parents probably wasn't as smooth as you think, because the 60s have to come from somewhere.
Yes.
And so where did all the churches split? I know the Pilgrim Holiness and the Wesleyan Methodist merged in 1968. In fact, a few blocks from where my parents still live in Anderson, Indiana. And then the Bible Covenant, the Bible Missionary. In fact, Bible Missionary was before that, the 50s, I think.
Yeah, 58, I want to say. I think it was 58.
Yeah, and then, of course, they kind of did their own thing, which I don't know, Missy's with Bible Missionary. They kind of did their own separate thing in the Midwest. And then the Bible Covenant came out, and then they split. And, it's like, and so all of that stems from the 50s and 60s. Well, what was going on in culture? From what I've gathered, they didn't like what the hippies looked like, long hair, rebellious, whatever. So they equipped that whole rebellious, I'm going to grow my hair out and do what God has allowed me to do. And then, like, oh, no, we can't do that. We have to look different. So instead of saying, let's look different by not gossiping and not lying and not cheating and all that, no, let's do it by our beards. And, of course, they would say you shouldn't do the other thing too, but the emphasis, it seemed like, came from the external. And so then you have how many years after, where now you're dealing with people, kids, grandkids, great grandkids now, they're like, what's going on here?
Exactly. They almost acted as if you got a haircut and shaved your face, then you couldn't be rebellious and be a hippie. It's like that's not the way that works, guys. It's they somehow get caught up on the externals, and they think that somehow dictates the inside, and that's not the case at all.
Well, but it preaches, though, because that will remind us when
it does. Yes,
you put that artificial flower in your head because you don't have the lily of the valley in your heart. as one Baptist preacher or anybody put in his sermon note, weak point, pound pulpit. So that's always a good thing to do when you
Yes.
when
Yes.
you don't have good truth. You just yell it louder, or yeah.
That reminds me of one of the Hammaker guys. I can't remember, was it Tim or Mark? There's two of them. I can never keep them straight. One of them used to pound the pulpit during the entire sermon. I can't remember which one it was. This guy, he would. I mean, I don't know how the man didn't have just crippling arthritis in that hand. He would assault the pulpit. I'm talking like about every 15 seconds he was smacking on that sucker.
Yeah. But it extends even farther. The church I grew up in, which is no longer CHM, it's a church where James Keaton pastored at, where M.R. McCurry pastored at, Mark Craven's pastored at. So it's pretty big names. In fact, Dwayne Questenberry pastored there too. And I know his wife is a favorite among some people, Valerie Questenberry.
Yes.
But that's the church I grew up into. In fact, that's where John Baker goes now. My brother, he still goes there. But that church was very conservative at one point. And even in the 90s, they have like a softball game, and the people could come from the community or whatever. And even there, I think they wanted the girls to wear skirts.
If you come to play softball, they wanted to.
I think so. Yeah, it was kind of like I think it was kind of I don't know if it was like a youth camp mentality. If you've been, obviously, I grew up in youth camp. I don't know if you did or not, but you have the girls. You have to go. You have to wear skirts. You can't be.
Yep.
You can't be modest and wear pants and play softball or whatever. But anyway, anyway, so on that one, that's literally this as of the 90s. I mean, this wasn't just to be a member. This was to play softball. Like at a church. And one of the leaders in that church, I won't say the name, but he has since said, yeah, let's do. So that was cool to hear that.
Yes,
because this is a person that's older that wouldn't have probably back then. He's like, yeah, that was he recognized that was not the smartest thing to do. So there are people that are changing, and my heart goes out somewhat to some of those people that had parents or grandparents or preachers like that have been able to say, you know what, yeah, they did that, but that wasn't biblical, that wasn't right, and they're able to make those distinctions.
When you talk about some of them changing now, it can't be easy for some of these guys like David Fry.
Absolutely not.
You mentioned, I think you mentioned earlier, Mark Stetler, John Earls. Some of these guys that are, Earls, they are taking a stand.
Travis Johnson. Yeah.
Yes, Travis, and these guys that are taking a stand for what's right, trying to change the movement from the inside. That I have a sneaking suspicion that cannot be easy, and I applaud them for that.
Yeah, and in fact, Keith Wagner put in 2016 in a blog post that he thought there would be a split among the CHM, which he put it out on the internet. So I hopefully he doesn't mind me saying his name, but it's like you can't. I've tried to pull it up since then. I haven't been able to, and sadly, that's not what needs to happen. But in a way, it seems like that's what's happening or going to happen because, as you mentioned, Val Methodist, Dan Stetler, as far as I know, he's still part of Val Methodist. It's like, that. How far can that go if this is what they're going to emphasize? But if they're willing to say, you know what, this is my rules, this is my convictions, I don't agree with it. I don't agree with the way your direction you're going, whatever it is. I think that's what the apology from Plank and IHC committee really was emphasizing, was the direction you're heading.
Mm-hmm.
I guess I've kind of jokingly said it. It's kind of a stupid analogy, but kind of grew up with this idea. If you put their wedding ring on, then the very next day you're naked at Woodstock, which is stupid.
Yes. They love the slippery slope argument. Yes.
Oh, absolutely. And we all know that there's some truth in it to a certain degree, but it's also like, no, there's also Holy Spirit, there's also self-control. And if we get our emphasis on what the Bible says, you don't have to go there. And obviously the people that have gotten, quote, more conservative, maybe I know I've got a relative that's really staunch against alcohol, and this is not a conservative person because he's seen what alcohol's done. He has seen, and it's like, yeah, do you need to drink alcohol? No. But do I also need to say you can't be a member if you drink alcohol? No, I don't see that. But if you're drunk, I have no problem with that because it's a sin. And
yes,
it's just sad because there's so much in the Bible. I mean, I don't know if you read the Bible lately. Even the modern version that Atwell talked about, I think it was Atwell. He was not a big fan of the NIV or the the Living Bible, and this was back in '94. In fact, I Googled him, and he died in '95 in a car wreck. So it looked
Okay, it
like
was
he died a
95.
year after these sermons were put out. He died.
It's just, for one thing, you have this is something I don't quite understand. Like with groups like the Bible Methodist and all the CHM groups do this, but and by the way, it is very interesting. Sometimes I think people forget this that Dan Stetler is Bible Methodist, and that is
Absolutely is. Absolutely.
that.
Yeah, I know that.
When you were talking about those directions that are not really, they're not. Those guys are definitely not in the same lane. That's going to be kind of interesting to watch over the next few years. But just putting stuff in a manual to begin with, to me, and saying that you have to sign to do this, it's like, guys, we got this big book right here. Ain't that
Yeah.
ain't that good enough? Can I just go by that instead of they all like to do this. I remember somebody talking about, or Canaan was saying, was a relative of his. They wanted to try to start a church denomination, and the first thing they did was they sit down and wrote a manual.
Absolutely. Got it. You got to write that. Yeah. 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 So what I was saying was even the modern versions I'm convicted by, because those are trash compared, according to the Fundamental Baptists and some of the CHM, those are trash versions. But it's like, I don't have those mastered by any stretch of the imagination.
No.
And so my point is, there's so much in the Bible to preach, and
Yes.
so much that you could convict 4,902 people at Gatlinburg Convention Center that everybody, if they're honest, could learn from, and the Holy Spirit could speak to them. And yet, we're going to mention rings or television or whatever the buzzword is at that morning, and it's just so sad. So I don't think there needs to be a split by any means. I just think, once again, we all think our opinions are the truth, right? But it's like, it just seems so simple to me. And I also see this because we've been quote been out of my wife and I have been out of the CHM since pretty much 2007. So it's been 15, 16 years, and I've seen it both sides. I've seen the liberals kind of look at the conservatives, just call them legalists. And I think that's too broad of a stroke. I don't think that's fair at times. And then I've seen the other side where the quote legalists or conservatives will look at the liberals and say, oh, they're just sin word thought and every day. It's like, yeah, there's truth in both, but that's way too generalization. It's not fair. It's not charitable, because I'm in a church now where another thing I'd like to get to is the preaching. I know you've done it, I think, on a podcast, or I've seen somewhere where the preaching in CHM in so many cases, at least in these revivals and these IHCs and all this camps, are so shallow versus what I'm hearing. We're literally right now, tomorrow, ending the series in the book of Amos. And when I say a series in the book of Amos, I'm talking they have spent about 12 weeks in the book of Amos. It's not a church growth philosophy. Before that was First Corinthians. Before that was, or we've done Daniel. We're about to go into Luke, which the way our pastor does it, it'll probably be literally 3 years in Luke, or maybe 2 years in Luke. And my point is, that takes a lot of effort and a lot of study to get the context, to work at it slowly, to give the full group of the Bible. And it's preaching on, in fact, he preached 3 weeks on First Corinthians 1 through 11. Now, his interpretation did not come to what the CHM would approve of, or as Solomon Schaefer says, the full light, where it says it's clear that you're not supposed to cut your hair.
Yes, the full light.
He did, if somehow it wasn't clear to him. But my point is, he preached 3 sermons just on that. So the lazy, I hate to say late. I kind of hate to say in a way I don't. Just, and I've preached many times, so I can vouch personal experience too, that you can be lazy and just preach the whatever comes easiest for you or whatever. And I know a lot of these evangelists and stuff, this is a message they preached a bunch, and I get all that, and they have their little stories, but it takes a lot of work to get in there. And so this church we're in now is a very different experience that we've been used to, but just the depth of what they preach is incredible. But I have heard my pastor say, I've sinned this week. And once again, he is not laughing about it. He's not making a like, oh, this is something you should do, go do it. But he is just practically looking at life and saying, I did it. It's not something you should try to do.
Absolutely.
It's something you need to continue to pray about. But so my point is, the way I was raised would have been more like, yeah, there are a bunch of liberals over there. And then the liberals over here are saying, nah, they're a bunch of legalists. They just think you have to do all these rules to go to heaven. And I just think that's too broad of a picture. And I think there's got to be a balance somewhere in between that honors God and that glorifies God.
Well, it sounds like to me, I like the balance that you're talking about, that your preacher strikes, because I think, how do I want to say this? So the CHM does not like to call things sin, but I also think that if you do sin, like if I'm short with my wife or something like that, or say something that I shouldn't have to her or something, if I call it for what it is, which I believe is sin, instead of a mistake, then that hits me harder.
Yeah.
If I'm like, okay, this is sin, then to me that's a much more pressing issue than I made a mistake. So therefore, I'm more likely to take it seriously and try to correct it. That's one of the things I've noticed from. I like some of the Calvinist preachers, even though I'm not a Calvinist, but I like listening to a lot of them. And I think it was John Piper. He was saying that they kind of make this point that you become more disgusted by your sin. You take it more seriously, as time goes on, as you grow in Christ, and you try harder and you work harder at it. And I think that's a better approach than not calling things sin. And it also, if somebody does that, it doesn't lead to that liberal side of the road, which you're talking about, and I completely believe it exists, where it's just kind of like, a sin's, whatever. We're going to do it, right? Don't we all sin? It's like, I don't like that way of looking at it. That doesn't make it serious enough.
Yeah, there is such a fine balance, and that's one of the big reasons why I hate is too strong a word, but why I dislike the culture of the conservative movement, at least what I remembered, was just this idea that we don't sin, and yet we see sin, but we can't call it sin. And you just this big vicious cycle, and yet it's just not fulfilling because that's there. And it's just not, to me, it's not authentic.
Yes,
And maybe that was just me, but from what I gathered, and it's just so refreshing. And once again, I understand the other balance, the other side of it. What you're saying is, then there's just kind of this apathy and just kind of like, oh, whatever, we all do it. It's like, no, that's not Bible either. And there's a reason
yes.
why Joshua 1:8 says, don't depart to the left or to the right. And I'll give credit to my brother here. We were talking today, and old John Baker, he was saying, isn't it just as bad to add things to the Word of God? As it is, quote, to subtract them. And really both sides, and even to this day, every time I hear the word legalist, it's just like, hey, I don't know, it's a little strong there. But I also know I understand how it comes across that way. When you get up and literally say, if I wear short sleeves and if I have a television and if I go the way of the world, then I have backslid, then it's like, yeah, that sounds kind of legalist.
Yes, it does.
And yet I do not believe that James Plank, I really don't think that he thinks that saves you. But I also think that when they say they have full light, when you have full light, then if you back up on that,
that's very interesting.
in their mind,
what you just said there, because I agree with you on that I don't think if you sat Jim down and talked to him about this, that he would think that your works save you. So I'm trying to think how this comes into play, because they put a very big emphasis on works and the standards and all that. So I'm just trying, man. I guess I'm trying to get inside of Jim's head, and that's hard to do.
Well, that's why, and I know that there was a new podcast like Joe Welch put out, and talking about why that apology mean is so significant for him, and why that stuff does matter, because it was good to hear. And so, in fact, one of my friends I texted, they said they were glad somebody just came out and said it, because under the surface we know that's what they believe. I used to believe that. I think you've said that in a previous podcast where you kind of thought, yeah, they're going to hell.
Oh, yes.
You judging, whatever. And I know I've been there. Even to this day, if I see a woman that's not dressed the way of the CHM, even to this day, my first thought, or could be pretty quick, is I'm not saying they're not a Christian, but it's right there. It's just something that you just don't lose overnight. And it's just kind of good they actually came out and said it, even though he said it. I don't think he totally believes it. But as he said, I'm sorry. He said in his own words, I'm tired of the sugarcoating of it. And so he's obviously talking about those that aren't the best and the brightest, as he has said from a pulpit, that have left. And that includes a lot of people. And it includes way more people, even people that were defending him. It's funny.
Oh, yes.
Even people that are defending him don't even line up to his standard. And it's like, what are you doing? It's like, you don't even line up. And yet you're over here saying, oh, go play. It's like, what are you doing? Can't we all just say, what the Bible says, love God with everything you have, love your neighbor yourself. If we all got that mastered, we're good to go. Can we just do that? No, we can't, because we're human and we sin.
Yes, we do.
Let's just say it. Both sides are sinning. We're not, we're going to
Correct.
come out and we're going to come out and change our sermon on a Saturday. I guess he changed it. I guess I won't say the name, but yeah, I guess it was out there. It don't matter really. But these are going to change the sermon, put it on live stream, and say, David Fry, you should have not done social media, and yet now I'm going to say, preach about you, even though I don't say your name from up front. It's like, and that's okay. It's like, no, it's not okay. But I'm not de-Christianizing him. The guy probably has a great heart. I'm not, I'm not de-Christianizing him at all. And that's what's amazing to me is through all this is, Precious Joan Stetler and Valerie Questenberry and all these people that are.
I love the Precious tag you're putting in there. That's
Oh, I do. I do keep giving the Precious name, don't I? But
I'm loving it.
No one is saying that they're going to hell. They're not de-Christianizing him. No one's, that's not, Natalie. I know you've had her on the broadcast.
Mm-hmm.
She's just trying to help people. Like you've said, I think you've said it twice. You just said it again. There's people that you have, relatives that you have, that think they're going to hell if they don't do the CH. And it's just like, man, these are people that are precious souls. I struggle with that even to this day, because you've had it just hammered so much. And when you get Atwell up there saying, if you're not sanctified, stand up and turn around and face the people, and will you come up here and pray? I mean, how can you can't just let that drop. And it's interesting to me, those people that have left the whole movement and just gone on their merry way, it seems like, and don't even care anymore. It's like, I don't know how they do it. Like, hats off to them somewhat, but it's like that that's not my personality or whatever.
Well, you mentioned
Because
about
it's something
is still struggling with being judgmental somewhat to this day.
Mm-hmm.
I've not told this story on the podcast yet because I was too ashamed, I think. But I did not realize still yet how much that I struggle with that. And I was at the Berean Holiness Conference this summer, and I'm sitting there, and first of all, the one guy gets up preach to speak. He's one of the hosts of Cultish, and about halfway through it, he mentioned something about having a tattoo. He showed his tattoo, and I thought, I didn't notice that. I thought, I'm doing good. I'm doing better. I mean, never mind.
Okay,
I've got I've got a tattoo now myself, but sometimes still yet it jumps out to you, And I thought, well, maybe I'm not noticing things as much as I used to. That's awesome. And then I guess I got too proud or something. There was a lady that got up to speak, and she had a real short haircut. And I did not say anything to anyone else around me, but this is what's going on in my mind. I'm like, okay, I obviously don't believe it's wrong for a woman to cut her hair, but I mean, let's be serious here. This is kind of how I'm thinking towards this. I'm like, all right, what are we doing? What are we doing here now?
Absolutely.
And this lady commences to tell her story. Fantastic story about how she grew up very much in hyper fundamentalism and got deep out into sin, into the world and all that, and how God brought her back. And then she mentioned, this is what made me feel about 2 inches tall, that she had been fighting with breast cancer.
Oh, wow.
And then the shame rolled over me. And it was like, Phil, what is wrong with you? And the lady continued to tell the story, and it was such a powerful story. But at the end, she gets a standing ovation from the crowd. Just this powerful, that Christ is there and he's ready to take you back. There's this redemption story that was fantastic, worthy of a movie. And, I'm just thinking, oh my gosh, I've still got it. I'm still fighting with that.
Mm-hmm.
And then I realized too, not only, did she make the comment about fighting with breast cancer, it was like, Phil, why did it even matter to you anyways? Why were you even shame on you?
Yeah.
And so I still do struggle with that more than I like to think.
Yeah. Yeah.
But anyway, I forget where we was at before I jumped in there.
I get it. Well, let's throw another stupid thing from when I was in college, and I this is not firsthand because this has to be the girls, I think, but this is funny because it's even more relevant now with what Atwell said about the spit curls cover up because they don't have the spit fire, I guess, which I'm not sure what spit fire is, but
what is spit fire?
This is a 1996, 7, 8, somewhere around the range. Once again, Union Bible College. I already mentioned the story about the basketball. This is so stupid. It's like, how do you even tell the story? like the spit curls were a big thing back then, which my brother says he still doesn't even know what a curly bun is. So a spit curl is just, I'm not a girl, obviously. I don't even really have hair. So, but the hair that they curled in front of their ears, I think.
Yes.
But that
Yes.
was a thing back in the day, whatever. And you're losing brain cells even listening. But anyway, it's just like I guess the dean of women put it on the bulletin board a picture of the rock group Kiss, which were all men, I think, and I guess they had spit curls. I don't even know. And once again, it might even be true, but it's almost like satire of the IHC report. There's enough truth in it to think, yeah, that probably could have happened.
Yes.
So my point is, here's your lady having breast cancer, and have an incredible story of God, and yet we're talking about spit curl.
Yes. Absolutely.
Yes, because they don't have a Spitfire. But yeah, it's so sad.
And it's moments like that too, Jason, that make me realize too that, like you said, hey, we're standing on both sides of the things. We still struggle with it. At moments like that, I really come face to face with it. Where I'm like, ugh.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's still there. You got to work at that, Phil.
Yeah. Yeah, it's still there, but it's those people that, as you talk, I guess, to them and myself as well, that say they have to be that way, be a Christian. And I think it was Joe Welsh said on his podcast that he's had someone reach out to him and he does not get from him that he needs to be CHM to be a Christian, which is very cool. But to all those people, it's like, man, it's not everybody. There's some really good people, some really sincere people, some great godly people in that movement, and
yes,
they
there
will
are.
die in that movement and all that. But just that, I use the word bondage, it's a strong word, but just that idea that you're in fearful of going to hell every day till the next revival or whatever. That is not the God of the Bible.
No, it's not.
And thankfully, I know there's a lot of people that don't have the personality and conscience that I have, and they haven't struggled with that as much. But it's just like that culture fosters that, because there is seriousness in the Bible. I mean,
Sure.
you can't read the Bible and not look back and say, "Wow, God have mercy on my soul," and that should give us pause even more with all these other just frivolous stuff. I just don't even know how. I can't really have gosh about some of the stuff. Like, really, like that's where we're going to hang our hat on. And when I think Glenn Asbury has brought it out. I can say his name, right? He's your favorite Catholic.
Oh yeah, he's my favorite Catholic.
I think he brought it out. It's like, Hamas is killing Israel and all this stuff going on, and yet this is what we're going to address with Bible college people. And I think Kanan said it. Those people that would have been in that environment and UBC. I was there.
Oh
Mark
yeah.
Taylor said I was saved in that room. And it's like, you're very impressionable because anybody they bring in, for the most part, the school is saying, yeah, we this is somebody to listen to and whatever.
And Jason, that stuff sticks.
Which is, it's so funny. It's so funny. Oh, it definitely sticks. But it's so funny. Somebody brought it out on one of the social media. If they could just get rid of social media, we'd save a lot of problem, wouldn't we? But anyway, it wouldn't have all these issues. But it's like someone said that another speaker, I think it was Tracy that said it, another speaker at that player place wore short sleeve. And I'm almost certain it's Butch Keith. I know him. I've had him come speak at a church I was at. But in fact, he is, the Heath brothers. You probably heard the three Heath brothers.
Oh yeah.
The boy singing. That's the grandpa.
Ah,
but,
okay.
He used to be at Pell City Bible Methodist. He used to be at Talladega Bible Methodist, and now he does his own counseling company. He was at Hope Sun Bible Church for many years. He was another speaker at this World Changer. But they've had Mark Smith, and Mark Smith, I'm almost certain, wears a wedding ring. And UBC had him speak at their place within the last 10 years. And it's like,
well, what I was mentioning too about this stuff sticking, I can, and especially when you're that age, when you're teenagers, late teens, early 20s. But I can remember being a teenager and listening to guys like John McDonald or whoever, and these guys would do enough damage in a 45 minutes to an hour sermon, tell me something that, Jason, I'm not lying, took me years to dig out of.
Sure.
And so that is a real tragedy there, is the damage it does to those younger ones.
Yeah, and once again, it's not rocket science to me. It's something if you just if you just stick in the Bible, and I just saw my notes here. I've got to say this one. This is the last year I actually saw him do this, and I'll say it for your benefit, and I would say it anyway probably. But Precious James Blank said from his pulpit in Beavertown, Pennsylvania, Sunday night service, Labor Day, 2022. If you want to go look it up, he said something to the effect of, for some reason, he got on alcohol and tattoos, which I don't think is a problem in his church. I've been to his church many times and didn't see much of either. But he said, like, I'm dead serious. You go look it up. This is like, you get saved, you cover that tattoo up until you get money. You can take it off. You can take it off or something, or remove it. It's just funny. It's a Sunday night service, so you know almost everybody there probably were Christians anyway.
Yes.
And it's just like, what? Like, what? Like, what is like if you like, the Bible is just chock full of stuff, murderers and liars and whatever. It is like tattoos for one thing. The Bible doesn't explicitly say. If it does, then it's not directed. Certainly not in the New Testament.
Yes.
You know,
that's
is this
correct.
something you need to go get? No, it's not something you need to go get. But
Not
is
at
it
all.
a sin? Can't see it. Is alcohol a sin? No.
Nope.
If you would just still sit there and say drunkenness, and probably you don't need to be, go get the Guinness World Book of Records for tattoos on your body and cover every part, probably doesn't glorify God. If you just say that, okay. But what? Why? What are you talking to a new convert about covering their tattoo up?
Exactly.
Like, what are you like? Like, you're not even a Christian when you have it. Or I don't know. It just boggles my mind. And once again, that one's funny because that wasn't at UBC, that wasn't at IHC, that wasn't something that was, a rah session. That was at his church.
Yeah. Oh my!
Like, I don't know. It's hilarious. I mean,
and you're
I'm
right.
sure
There's
you
so
mentioned
much
John
good
Earls and
stuff there to preach. The Bible's loaded with things that we need. Why do they get off on this weird stuff?
Oh, I don't get it, because it's like the Bible, and I don't care what version you use. Use the Message version; it'll still convict me.
Yes,
I don't care what.
Yes,
It's not a version. It's not a version. It's not even a paraphrase. It's terrible in many cases.
Yes.
I agree with that. But my point is, it still says it there. Jesus died for your sins. Okay, it still says it there somewhere. And it's like, I don't know what it is. To me, it's what comes down to it is pride. Unfortunately, pride is to me the number one sin when it comes down to it, because you cannot. Period. Know if you're you can't tell if I'm prideful. Really, I can't tell if you're prideful. That's an inward motive. It seems in many cases it seems like you can tell, but we really can't tell. It's a hard issue, and yet I can be proud and I was. I've been there, done that. I'm proud because I don't have the I whatever, and I don't know. I don't know. I do not understand it. I do not understand it. But man, it sounds good when you say, put the artificial flower in your hair because you don't have the lily of the valley in your heart. I mean, that's incredible. But it sounds good, but it's just so heretical and so stupid and so. And, in that sermon, and because my personality is, I always look at the other side. Okay, all right, you got that. Well, then you're going to call him Porky because he puts hairspray, and it's like, I was that way, 14, 15. I looked like the Statue of Liberty sometimes because my hair would get so long.
Oh yeah,
and I would stick it up with the hairspray, and it's like, Porky? I was Porky because I had a little gut probably, but it's like, really? That's kind? That's kind? This is a guy that's saying that's wrong, but I'm kind by calling you Porky? Like, huh? But I guess you're the man of God, so you can get by with whatever you want to say. No?
And apparently God told him he could say whatever he wanted to. So,
well, and I know we don't go for all night here, but I did want to mention, I think, what Mariah brought out, and I texted you about this at Roland Mitchell in that sermon, and you did the episode Raging Roland. In fact, he's still part of my parents' conference, the International Coon Hunter Association.
ICHA.
Surely you heard that from Canaan, because I think Canaan used to be. He probably didn't claim he was part of it, but he was part of it with Mark. Anyway, until they gave donuts out. But anyway, can't do that.
Yeah, the donuts, that was a deal breaker.
But Roland Mitchell, did you say it that he pastored that church?
He pastored one there in Muncie. Yes.
Yeah, that precious stained window that has his name on it.
Yes.
That should have been underneath the rolling of the Shelbyville Bible Holiness. That should have been rolling. This illustration is presented by the guy that was pastor at the time, because that what is that called? The judge in the court trial. If you're too close to the situation, you remove yourself.
Yes.
So it's like, I should remove myself from this.
Yeah.
But in that same sermon, he talks about. Well, first of all, what Mariah talked about with the whole idea of what he said, the slat. skids. He
Skids.
said, on the wall they put skids on. It was the whole idea of making something broken beautiful.
Yes.
And it's like that with the Bible. It's like thank God for those people that are saying, you know what, we have a great heritage. Like Mark Stettler was doing that. We have a great theology, we have a great heritage. Let's don't do this stupid stuff. It's
Exactly.
like what good can and maybe through this apology and all this, maybe there will be, hope. I don't know what's going on with the whole, if they did block Berean holiness and all that. If that's true, it really, to me, takes away from it. I don't know.
Yeah, that was odd.
I don't have a problem. I understand. I don't have a problem with them if they don't like Berean holiness, what they're doing. Okay, block them after the apology. That's your right, whatever. But it's also like, if that's true, and I know the apology's out there. Obviously, we've all can see it. It's not hard to find, but it seems like if the apology came from pressure, then once again, I don't know his motive. I certainly don't believe if you wear short sleeves, he thinks you're going to hell. But I also know the way he said it, talking out off of his notes, it did not end in a good place. But in that sermon with Mitchell, he talks about my other brother's church they used to be at, not anymore. But it's funny because a lot of CHM people have been to this church. When he talks about the church that Harold Lilliness had pastored, which I don't know if you know that name or not, but he was
I have heard that
great
name.
Nazarene hymnal. And it was the Lilliness Publishing House, Nazarenes. I don't know if they still call that or not, but that was First Church Nazarene. My brother said it definitely was. And he said it was never black painted. It was never painted black. It wasn't even a warehouse type. It was an actual building. I've been to it many times. In fact, we had my mother's 70th birthday party there. It had basketball hoops, which is funny Mitchell didn't say that, but it was like, it never gives a sense that it's like this darkened warehouse. It was so funny the way he was saying it. It was just like the way he was presenting the illustration was like this. Quote,
so your brother went to that church, the other one he was talking about.
He was the worship pastor. Yeah, my brother was the worship pastor. Probably may have been when that concert happened, because Mitchell mentioned that was the Collinsworth family.
Yep.
That I know you didn't play the clip of that, but it was just like he took like this church, and I've been to a church that was really blackened out, and I didn't care for it personally. Once again, it's not a sin, but it wasn't my preference.
Yeah.
But it was like he took this thing and was literally acting like it didn't glorify God and all this, and it was like, it's funny because my brother had multiple concerts in there with Mark Lowry, Phillips, Craig and Dean, the Collinsworth family, different Southern gospel groups, Greater Vision, all that. And it's like, it didn't have any windows, but a lot of buildings don't have windows anymore. It had a hallway went around it, but Roland Mitchell's like, I went walking around looking for the sanctuary, and it's like, it's like, and it's like rah rah, people, all those liberals are going to hell, and it's like, yeah, I guess. But he's like, oh, I got my books for sale outside. Good for you. You want a cookie? I mean, and I think he, I'm not questioning his spirituality. I think he's going to heaven.
Mm-hmm.
God bless him. But it's like, why are you tearing down another place? Because I don't know. Looks like a warehouse.
Well, you mentioned something there too about the church, that you were at. That when your preference, and I think that's what happens a lot is these guys get their preferences, and they somehow read into that God has the same preferences that they do, and so therefore they're good at casting all of us into the pit for having preferences against
that. Absolutely, and that's that word right there. If they could just use that, and I know sometimes they've said it like, "Oh, I'm getting in the brush," or "I'm going down the rabbit trail," and I know Dan Stetler tried to back up when he called people that wear wedding rings sissies. He stopped. He's like, "Oh, I'm gonna get in trouble for that." Yeah, you should get in trouble for that.
Yes, you should.
It's funny because they know they're not preaching Bible, but it still is so ingrained in them, and they're so scared. As Plank says, I'm so tired of them sugarcoating. They're so scared of people going to hell, and I guess they're scared of the people that are souls are being saved and churches are growing, and yet they're not the conservative anymore. I mean, even specifically said, I don't care if they're behind pulpits. I mean, that was very pointedly saying there's a lot of people out there. I know quite a few myself that I went to school with or know that are pastoring churches that aren't CHM, and they're growing. I'm thinking of 4 right now that are pretty big churches or growing, and that used to be very CHM, and they aren't earning. And he's literally saying they're backslid. I mean, that's what he said. Once again, I know he came out and apologized, and so that's awesome. But I'm just saying that's what he said. And when you're saying that's pretty serious.
Yes, it is.
And that's why, and I'm pretty sure that's why David Fry was a friend of mine. I think that's why he said, "Okay, it's time to call it," and he did.
I sent David a message as well and told him how much I appreciated that. Him and John Earls and Mark Stetler, all three of them. I wanted to make sure, just for what it was worth, let him know that I really applauded them for having the guts to do that. I think it was great. We've mentioned Joe Welch a couple of times. I want to plug his podcast because you mentioned his podcast. Joe's been his Facebook posts are really interesting. They really make you think. And then he is since he talked to me a little bit and before he launched the podcast that he was thinking about doing it. It's very interesting to watch Joe like search for. I guess you say search for God. It's really really cool to watch. And he's got a podcast out now. It's called My Journey Back to God, and I think you can find that about anywhere that podcasts are available. But check Joe out as well.
Yeah, and he raises on that podcast the idea with Archie Atwell Jr., Ray Campbell, Paul Gray, and I had lost track. I hadn't seen him for years, and I think I went to school with him. I know I went to a youth camp with him, and it seems in his case, and once again, I do not know by authority, but just by what he was saying, was that he kind of got distracted, sounds like, through some of those craziness
yes,
that he heard. Because he mentioned 2019, so he's pretty recent in the CHM. And so I think he's trying to find the journey or where he's at on there. So yeah,
sure.
It's pretty neat what's going on there.
Well, Jason, I don't want to keep you all night. This has been a very good episode. Now, I would imagine I kind of doubt we covered everything in your notes. So at some point, if you're ever feeling froggy, you want to do this again, just let me know. And your agent, John, I'm sure he'll put us back in touch. I like John. He'll usually we'll drop an episode and then I'll usually wind up with a phone call or a voice message and be like, all right, on your latest episode. And he'll give me his thoughts and walk me through it. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. You can blame some of me on that because we probably talked by then too and shared about it. But yeah, I definitely look it up when Hillbilly's coming out and all that. But I think just the bottom line is God's good. Jesus is incredible. And the more we focus on him, the Holy Spirit, he's going to figure it all out, work it all out, and be more libertarian and less authoritative. That's where I'm at in life.
I like that.
Politically and church-wise, and God will work it out, and I don't have to judge or worry about, and that's a good message for me too, to worry about the other person, worry about myself, which is something that I struggle with.
Sure.
I don't need all those rules, because I was actually at a place where I thought there should be more rules because this church had taken pretty much everything out. It was pretty much love God, and it's like, and the church we're at now has, it has some scripture in it, to give and to be faithful and all that and to walk manner worthy, but it's all scripture right there. There's nothing specifically about don't drink or don't gamble or don't wear this or don't go there, but it's still it's something, led by the Bible. So there's nothing wrong with having some things listed. It's like one paper. And to me, it's just like, man, what's wrong with that? Why as a leader would you want to have that, that pressure of saying, oh, did they do this and that? And it's just like, I think God's kind of already done that right there. And
one of the sayings that
on his son,
one of the sayings that we used to hear, I think in the CHM, which I think that the CHM leaders and preachers should take to heart, is let go and let God. It was always.
Can you imagine?
It was always given to us. It's like, hey, just don't worry about your cares. It's like, well, I think that could apply to y'all as well. How about ease up on the control and let God work with the individuals on these secondary issues.
Yes. Because Jesus is as beautiful now as he's ever has been.